Hey everybody, welcome to the show Off the Record. I'm Aram Melkoumov, the host. Thank you so much for tuning in. On the show, I'm interviewing well-known CEOs and VCs about how to spend the money that you raise effectively and what mistakes to avoid. My guests have been in the trenches and have lots of practical advice to share from company stories, failures, and successes with you. As a founder, you'll hear what you can do better when raising money and after you have raised the money as well, all in a 30-minute conversation. And if you happen to be a VC, you're also in the right spot, so you'll get to learn from your peers. This is episode number 13, and I'm joined by yet another great founder and CEO. Lucas Martinez is the co-founder and co-CEO of talent.com, one of the fastest growing employment websites in the world. They recently raised 53 million from CDPQ in Quebec to accelerate growth and power expansion. They have more than 30 million job vacancies in 77 countries and have more than 5,000% growth in 5 years. Talent.com recently ranked 14th in Canadian Business Magazine's 2019 Growth 500. So really, really impressive stuff. Lucas, amazing having you here with us today. Thank you so much for giving us some time today.
Thank you for having me here.
Hope I got that bio about yourself and your company accurate.
Yeah, that was perfect. Sure, we could
Awesome.
we speak like for ages of everything we're doing, but like as a quick intro, that was great.
Cool, wonderful. First question I have is kind of like a personal one. It's an icebreaker, so to speak. You're from Switzerland, right? If I'm not mistaken.
Yeah.
I wanted to ask, how is your mentality different or similar to Canadians? Because I know you're based in Canada right now. Let's start there.
I think when I read when you ask this question, I'm like, it's a tricky one because I think Swiss and Canadians are very, very similar. Like very neutral people. We hardworking people, at the same time humble. We don't like scream. We are the best all around. So it's I think in that sense, even in terms of geography, like with an type of weather that we get. Maybe it's not as cold here in Switzerland, but like everyone skis and we're very outdoors country, a lot of lakes everywhere. So I would say it's a very similar thing being Swiss or Canadian. I think maybe two major things are very different in entrepreneurship. The first one is in Canada, the great thing that you have here in North America is that you have the US right next to you. And when you think about scaling, you don't ask yourself too many questions. Like after Canada, it goes straight to the US. You don't have to translate anything. Everything's in English already. So you're just there in the biggest market in the world. And I think it makes scaling a bit easier than being in Europe, when you just need to, just in Switzerland, you need to think about 4 languages that you need to translate in order for you to be competitive in Switzerland. And then you got to scale. The first thing you think usually is to scale around Europe and not necessarily in the US because of time zone. So I would say that's a major thing. And then I would say in Switzerland, I think its advantage is because of the fact that we speak 4 languages. I personally do not speak 4 languages, but we have four languages that are spoken in the country. What it means is that we are very open to the world. And I think in less than 3 hours, you are more than 5 countries next to you. So it's I think like we're very good at like when we have to scale, we're very good at localization. Like getting to know the cultural differences in all those countries, because we have to do it here in our own country. Whereas here in Canada, like it's here in Montreal, that you don't have it's you have to drive quite a fair bit to see different cultures, and everything is far away, one with dispersed. So I think these are two, one advantage on the one side, one advantage on the other side. But overall, I think two great countries to be born and to be raised, because the education system, and I think both provide great opportunities for its citizens.
Nice. Yeah, thank you. Next question I have is, I noticed. I know that at talent.com you're a co-CEO. I've seen it work magically, and I've seen in different settings it doesn't work. I wanted to get kind of maybe quickly your the way that you've structured your relationship with your other co-CEO in terms of like decision making, especially you went through this large fundraising process recently. Like, what is that dynamic like for you?
Yeah. We are actually three co-CEOs from day one.
Wow.
So the story is with three very good friends, and the story starts actually in Switzerland. So that's how we've done it. And you know, we always have been very collegial about how we make decisions, and we think that, you know, having two co-CEOs is actually worse than having three, in our opinion, because, you know, you always have a tiebreaker. So I think that's what's great in what we do here is that we have very defined areas of expertise, and in the very defined areas of what we are in charge, and that's how it works. Then obviously the way it works is that you need to make sure that you speak your mind. So there is a lot of, I would say, so-called fights, you know, where we always always discussing things that we do not agree with. But at the end of the day, that's the only way it works. You know, there is no magic bullet here. It's about really like getting along, fight for ideas, respect each other, know our boundaries. And it actually works. So what we do is, you know, when we really disagree on something, it's about, you know, like someone has a veto, you know, like it's say, no, no, I really don't want it. Like a bit like the UN style. Well, if it's that close to your heart, you know, that you have to use a veto, well, you know, we'll listen to it. But so far, in 10 years now, we haven't used it.
Wow.
So far, it's really usually the way it works is that one has a very strong opinion, a very strong vision, and one is kind of against, and the third one has not necessarily a strong opinion. And that's how we move forward. So it's great for checks and balances here. We really work like a parliament, and I think that it's been working so far, and I think there's no reason why it shouldn't keep on working.
No, that's great. I mean, if it works, it works. That's fantastic to know.
And we're still friends after 10 years. We're still very close friends.
That's the important part. I mean, a lot of people don't know this, but CrowdLinker initially, first 3 years we had two co-CEOs. For us it didn't work, but we kept clashing and didn't work. But I'm really happy to hear that, you know, how you've structured it. It's great. I mean, as long as you can stay friends and business partners at the same time, it is magical at the end of the day, having three partners at that same level. Cool. I want to jump into some questions about like the fundraising process that you went through. So like, I know you raised different stages of funding now, and like your most recent one was quite significant for 53 million. What was that like? Like it must have been a lot of stress, anxiety, kind of going through that process. It is a sizable amount, so like I don't know if there was more pressure than usual, you know, compared to a previous round that you went through. What was it like for you personally, and kind of how did you deal with it?
Yeah, so I think there was we've been for a very long time. We've been a profitable company. We raised a first round quite a few years ago, already in 2012, and you know, since then we kind of remained profitable, and we didn't really need anything in terms of cash. So we were actually growing year on year and doubling our revenues despite being profitable. So that's why we didn't need to go in the market. But I think at some point also our business angels wanted to see the color of the money that they invested, which was extremely fair. And what happened at that point is that we started a process. So we had investment bankers that helped us to create a process, and that's when we started to mostly meet different funds, private equity, VCs, pension funds, obviously, mostly throughout North America. And yeah, I think the process has been, I think it's been we were really anxious in a sense, because you think a process is gonna take 3 months, but it took a year. So from the moment we decided that we were gonna do it until we actually closed, it took approximately a year. And obviously it takes away a lot of your attention and time on the business. And the luck we have is that we're three co-CEOs. So, like one can spend a bit more time on one thing and the other can spend a bit more time on the other. So we never really felt that that we lost track of what we're doing business-wise. So that we were lucky in that sense. But the reality is that because we've been, like we were really we just had one round before, one business angel round. So we were not, despite having, I would say high revenues for a startup. I think when we started this process, we must have been around like 40 or 50 million run rate. We were really not that professionalized, in terms of structure, in terms of finance, in terms of legal. So it was a hurdle, because we had to do everything ourselves. We have a legal counsel, an external legal counsel, but we had no one internally. And finance, we didn't have any, head of finance there. So it was the other co-founder who was the VP of finance, and I was helping there as well. So that's, I would say that was a bit tough, because we were most of the time with the investment bankers, spending an awful amount of time just providing documents, providing, like any numbers that they were asking us, and name it, everything. So that took a long time, and just not just like we really had to spend time like having our investment bankers understand, like what were we doing, how does our business work, how was our value proposition, and so forth, and so on and so forth. And I'd say that if you don't, you need to get investment bankers that get it from day one, and that know your industry, and and that obviously helped us to get someone that really that understood us. But it took some time as well, and at the end of the day, they became experts in what we were doing. But it takes time to get them understanding what you're doing, so that they can communicate well in the process, because they do all the communication with the different investment companies here. So just that, and plus then the fact that you still don't know. You receive the first round, you receive offers, but then they drop, and then others come, and valuation switches from like super low to super high all the time. It's until we really got something signed at the end, we were not we were very anxious. So we were lucky that we had the three of us. I think sometimes the journey as an entrepreneur can be very lonely, because you face problems and situations that no one can that can understand, and can relate to. So there is no comparables many times, and I think that just the fact that we were the three of us together in this, and that we could talk to each other and help each other throughout the process, helped tremendously.
It's it's a very laborious process going through a fundraising exercise like that. What was kind of like your biggest takeaway, like lessons learned? I don't know, like whether it's getting the documentation in order in advance, or having the right type of counsel in place, or like having the right type of partner. Like what can you share in terms of like something you could pass down to another founder who's going to be going through a process like that you're like, okay, here are like the 3-4 things you should like definitely have checked off before you go through a process like this?
I mean, I think the answer can be different for everyone, because it really depends on your strength as a founder and what you're good at, and where you think you can be better in a process like this, and what you can't. But I think in our case, I think organization was probably a weakness. Like being better at communicating our numbers, being better at communicating what we were doing, just being better at having material ready, being ready to have a strong message, that investors could really understand. And not only that, but really your investment bankers, because if you have investment bankers, like they're the ones who do all the sales for you, and these are the people that really need to understand your business and your vision. So I think I would say being more prepared would have in terms of operations, like, well, okay, now we start and, we have the right people in place, would have helped tremendously. But yet again, like, we didn't have the resources to have all of this. So there is no silver bullets, like, if you're lucky enough that you have all of this in place, that's great. What we had was a business that was working, already profitable and revenue. So we had good leverage and growth. But we were extremely lean. So yeah, the operations were definitely not something that we were investing as much as we are today.
Mm-hmm. I've never been through a process like at that scale, but when you were planning the raise and you were working with your investment bankers and obviously the institution that you raised the money from, how much time, attention, focus was dedicated towards like the allocation of the spend? Like, was that kind of a game plan that was set at the time of the fundraising process, or did it come like after like the deal was signed? Like, how much detail or focus was spent on something like that?
I think it really depends on the stage you're on as a company, because I think investors understand that, like, the less mature you are as a company, I mean, you can come with a plan, but this plan could actually deviate quite a bit, right? So I think we were lucky enough that we had investors that understood that we had a plan, but that but at the same time, despite already like a big size, I would say, we were probably not as detailed in that, okay, we're gonna do this or that. We said, okay, we knew where this was going to go, but it wasn't, as clear as it could be today. Now that we have these investors with us, and we understand, in case of the next round in the future, we understand how much more precise we'll have to be. But we also have more maturity, and we also can predict a bit better than we used to. Before, it was, when you're smaller, it's always on a month to month. It's you wish you could predict for 2 years or a year, 3 years, but the reality, it's tough. So you do your best, but it's really up to the investors to understand, like, to really get what's in the founder's mind, and if they think they're able to, even if they're not going to execute on the plan exactly, are they nimble enough to actually deviate and make it work? And I think that's how our investors understood that with us, from day one, that like, we had a plan, but the goal was really to, like, we were not shy to change this plan. And it can, at a certain level, if we were to do that same thing today, I think it would scare off a few investors, because it wouldn't look like we know exactly where we're heading. But where we were at the time, I think it makes sense. So I hope it answers your question, but like that's the overall thinking process I went through, at least.
Yeah, no, it's interesting for me to hear that, because even larger corporations, like, they go quarter by quarter. Like, it's very hard to predict like a 1 year spend or 2 years, right? With the counsel, if I remember correctly, you said also that the legal counsel that you had helped structure some of like the terms of the deal, or like the composition of like the organization or whatnot. Like, how much importance and attention did that give to the benefit of like the whole deal at the end of the day?
Yeah, so I mean, the two counsels talk to each other. Once you start to, at the end of the process, when you start to agreeing, like, there's an entire new process that starts, and that's just a legal process to make sure that everything you said, and that every single investor is protected and all those things. So, I mean, you cannot, at this level, you can't do it without a legal counsel. I mean, that it's paramount. You just cannot. Yeah. Otherwise, you need lawyers and it's expensive. But you got to protect yourself. Your investors have to protect themselves, and there is no other way. So, we were lucky enough to have great lawyers. We used Lavery and Associates here in Canada, which have been tremendously helpful throughout the stage. We started to work with them already like when we were extremely small, and
Yeah.
they work with us while growing, and and we're still working with them now. But like, yeah, I mean, no matter what, even if you have your own legal counsel, you will need external help, because there are so many components, as in a deal like this, that come into play, and you need this help. Sure.
Okay, cool. Thank you. Thanks for sharing that. Talk about the company a bit. I think at one point you realized that you didn't really have much competition with the business in Quebec. You guys were like the market leaders. And then when you started thinking about expansion, at what point did you realize that you can be like the second largest job platform after Indeed?
Yeah. So when we originally started, when we we were three co-founders, and as I said, and two of us moved from Europe to Montreal at the time. One was from here, and I think that was always kind of the goal. Like maybe it was a faraway dream to be like a global leader in the job space. None of us had experience there. When we started, traditional job sites were extremely strong still, like in Canada, like Workopolis or info jobs in Spain, or like Monster in the US. So those guys were still very strong in local, and had local presence, very strong local presence. But like as far as aggregators were concerned, there was just pretty much Indeed and Simply Hire that were like starting to slowly dominate the game in terms of traffic, candidate traffic, but not necessarily in terms of revenues. And it's only after 2 or 3 years that Indeed really became a market leader, and got sold actually. And I think it's probably in 2012, 2013 when we really learned how to scale globally, and we saw that traffic was actually doubling year on year. And when you double small numbers, it's you're like, it's cute, but the reality is like if you keep on doubling, it can very fast become very big, right? And that's what we realized very early on. I think the fact that we're also very far away from, like the spotlights in the US, and like we were just like this Montreal-based, French-based company here in Quebec, really kind of, it's a curse, but at the same time, it helps you because we had to be profitable. We didn't raise enough money to just like be burning, and we had to be profitable. So from day one, we were just biking and looking down and bike and bike this mountain as high as we could. So we led some players along the way on the road to become now one of the largest job sites in the world. We have in sight to really now to become a strong number two in terms, not only in terms of traffic that we are today, but also in terms of revenues. And that's what we're working on now. But I think pretty early on, we realized that, and our dream was that, like it was, okay, we scale around the world. Why would you, in 2012, when you make $50,000 of maybe not $200,000 of revenue in 2012, why would you translate your website in Arabic, for the Middle East, and it was always with the goal of becoming that very strong player all around the world. And so once we learned how to scale, we knew like that's what we wanted to do.
What did you when you came to this kind of realization, and you knew you wanted to be like the second largest one in the world, what did you change in your operations or strategy to help you scale?
I don't think we change anything. I think it's been a learning process, because as far as we three co-founders, and the three of us, none of us came from the industry. We all came and trial and error, basically. Like one learned how to code by reading books. I came to Canada and calling retailers thinking they were banks, because I'm the original sales guy here. And that's how we started. That's how it's. So I would say that there's been different aha moments. The moment where we learn how to scale, the moment where in terms of content, like all around the world. The moment where we learn how to monetize, we realize, I tried so many different business models, but I realized that it was only going to work if we were going to make money while we were sleeping. And that was pay-per-click advertising, right? And once we switched to a pay-per-click advertising model, that's when we really started to grow extremely fast. So that was another aha moment. So it wasn't conditioned by, okay, we can be number two. It was more like, okay, so we learned that, and then we learned how to generate more traffic on the website and have more return visitors. Oh, and at scale. And it was like, oh, okay, now we know how to bring results to clients. How do we make sure that they're happy? Okay, so it's not that easy to make sure that they're happy, you know, like tricking conversions and all those things to make sure that all the candidates that we receive were good enough, right? So so that's the process that we went through, really. And I think every year, every 2 years, we'll have a new haha that really propel us to new heights. And the reality is, once you reach good numbers, and you have a lot of traffic, we have around 80 million, 85 million visitors per month on our website worldwide. You know what? Then the little tweaks you make can really have a huge impact on your growth. So yeah, that's how we see it.
That's very interesting. That's crazy numbers. 80, 85 million visitors a month. That's really impressive. Great work on that.
Thanks.
I wanted to ask, you kind of touched upon this earlier. You were saying that, you know, when you raised your initial funding from some angels, they want to start seeing the green, right? In terms of the return on investment. Now you have this like larger institutional backer as well. How do you kind of balance the dynamic between kind of staying private versus considering or looking at the requests of the investors that you have right now in terms of like getting you IPO ready versus staying as like a startup and, you know, keeping things lean and or whatnot. How do you manage that?
Well, I think the one we brought, you know, VCs, you know, when we realized, okay, so now it's just not us and like what we want. It's also about other people and what, you know, they desire about this heading. But the reality is that they've been extremely patient with us, you know, in the sense that what do you guys want to do, you know, so we will follow. And that is very reassuring, you know, when you start working with people that tell you something like this. The case has been very, very helpful in that sense. And what we told them is that we wanted to, you know, I like to say professionalize the company, because we know that, you know, at some point, you know, there is so much you can do, you know, like at some point we struggled to ship code because you know, we were growing too large. We had no processes. We had everyone coding one way or the other, and nothing was actually shipping. So that's when we moved to Agile, you know, and that's when also when we had, you know, help on finance and, you know, bumping our finance efforts, like having a VP finance now, a CFO, you know, and legal people and at the office as well now, you know. So all those things, I think, we were not very used to. We were not very experienced in doing, but we knew that they were needed. And I think just bringing in, you know, an institutional investor will help us on that front. So they kind of guided us. You know, they know our strength and they don't bother us on our strength. You know, it's a bit like, you know, like you're a tennis player and they're a professional tennis player and they're your coach and they're like, okay, this guy is amazing at serving. Backhand is amazing, but forehand, so, and everyone knows it, right? So what they hear is to help you being better at your forehand. And so they kind of analyze what you're good at, what you're bad at. They let you go on what you're good at, and then they push your weaknesses. And I think we all were aware of our weaknesses. We don't have an ego, you know, as founders. We're like, okay, we know that we need help here, and that's what they do. But then it's important when you grow, and specifically, I think in our size, it's important to remain nimble. I think, you know, that's startup spark that helps you move mountains sometimes. You know, that large companies struggle with, because it's full of processes and it's difficult to make change happen. I think it's a constant battle right now to make sure that this stays. And lucky enough, one of the co-founders, what he's good at is innovation. So we're really trying, you know, despite having those new processes, you know, on the side where we professionalize the company, that he remains in a mindset where he can innovate and remain nimble. so that we can have that startup feeling, because I think that's what you don't want to lose when you grow, because that's what we've been good at. And yeah, so that's how we do it.
No, I like the tennis analogy. As a tennis player, I could relate.
Oh, there you go.
I like it.
But yes.
Is there any pressure on you to have an IPO in your roadmap from your investors? Has that ever been talked about or discussed? Like, is there?
They don't put pressure on us for an IPO. I think we put pressure ourselves for something like this. In a sense that, you know, maybe we're old school, and, you know, like those many companies right now don't necessarily think about IPO. They prefer to remain private. But we always dreamed, you know, like a big milestone will definitely to ring the bell of an exchange, and I think that's definitely something we would like to do in the future. We're not ready in terms of, you know, like the company itself, you know, like who we are as a company. We think we have the revenues, we have the growth, we could actually go there, and right now it's an amazing time to IPO. But I don't think we would be ready in terms of compliance and, you know, like all those things that for regulators that you need to have, you know, in terms of, again, we touched on this, but, you know, like just what are you revenue is going to be in the future and all of this. I think that this is definitely something, predictability, that we are working on right now. So there is still a process that we have to go through for us to be really ready for this.
Interesting. Has anybody? I'm sure you're growing your network. You're getting a lot of advice from other peers and people in your network. But has anybody given you any good advice that you're considering about their own experiences of going through a private to an IPO? Is there anything that you're like, okay, I should, you know, that's good to know, I should really keep that in mind when I'm going through the process? Has anything like that come out yet?
I think it's something that we're experiencing right now, you know, like, starting to ask questions a lot. One thing we thought is that maybe an IPO isn't just another round of, you know, raise, but the reality is everyone tells me that you're going to lose all your hair, you know, like when there's going to be a round of financing, because an IPO, because it's a lot of work. From A to Z, from like everyone works like a lot for this, and your life changes. It's not only when you reach IPO, but it's also like what comes after and the pressure that is there after. It's a different world, and I think in a sense people want to prepare us mentally, in a sense that it's not going to be easy. It's a lot easier when you're private, and that's what we keep on hearing. As opposed to being a public company. But besides this, right now, it's really about understanding what, you know, like a bit more, how does this process work? How do analysts think about, you know, like about companies? How do they price them? How do they ask questions? What's in their mind? What's important to them? I think right now we're going on this process, you know, like really understand what needs to be done in order for us to have in the future a great IPO.
Right. Okay. I'm going to go back to something that I was just thinking about. With your partners, you have, you know, three co-CEOs in a way. I'm curious to know, when you're planning your kind of budgets now, like, you know, you mentioned that one of your partners is really focused on innovation. You're focused, I know, on sales and growth, right? How do you kind of allocate spend across different initiatives? Is there, like, you put together a budget you presented between each other, between the three of you, and you kind of say, okay, yeah, let's do that, let's do this, let's do that. I'm curious how that dynamic works. I mean, from a budgeting standpoint, because innovation, I know, is like a big thing, right? So
So I think we trust each other. Like, one takes care of mostly all of European EMEA operations in terms of sales. I'm more sales in North America. I like the industry, so I like to talk about, like, you know, like B2B product and things like this in terms of innovation. And the other one is really the original IT guy, so like the innovation guy who thinks about product on the B2C front. And I think that what's important here is that we've always been profitable. So and we never really had to budget because we didn't have.
You're profitable.
We're profitable in the sense that we were, and we have live dashboards where we see our P&L live, because it's a pay-per-click business space, right? We buy a lot of traffic, we sell a lot of traffic, so we see all of this live. And historically, we've been very good with numbers, but not very good at budgeting. That's something that is actually changing right now. But it is true that I think it's just that we trust each other, and that every single person, the three of us, we know what we have to do. We trust each other, and as long as there is no abuse in terms of spend, we don't go into each other's neck. I would say I'm more sometimes of a micromanager in terms of numbers, making sure that things are good. I think the other one too. And what we say is, listen, this is my area. Below this number of expense, don't even talk to me. Let me do my thing. And trust me. And fair enough. And it works.
I like that. It's good. No, I mean that's if it works, it works. That's great. So Lucas, I wanted to ask you a personal question. I mean, you've gone through now a lot of different experiences in your life. What is something that you would advise a 30-year-old self of your own, with everything that you know now? What would you go back in time and tell that person?
Yeah, and the good thing is it's only 7 years ago, so
now we know how old you are.
No, I think that it's I used to play a bit of background. I used to play table tennis at I used to play for the Swiss national team. I used to travel all around,
Wow.
And so when you play sports, no matter what sport, and if you play at some level where you have to train a lot, it's a lot about the goal and not about the journey necessarily, right? Because you have to make sacrifices, and I think that's why also sport athletes in general have a lot of grit and are great at business. But when it becomes too much about the goal and less about the journey, I think it can create moments of anxiety and unhappiness. Because obviously not everything is going to be rosy. But I think I would say I think it's kind of it's great, but it's also a curse, right? That you're also about goals and the end goal. We want to be there, because it actually motivates people, motivates the troops that there is a vision, there is a clear goal of what we have to go. But the reality is that I wish I would have been a bit more, more relaxed, in a sense that, also try to enjoy the journey a bit more. Not that I didn't enjoy it, but I wish I would have enjoyed it a lot more, and cherish those moments that, when something good happens. I have too much of the sports mentality that when you win a competition, you're really thinking about the next competition. You don't take the time necessarily many times to just enjoy that moment. And I think celebrating good moments and look back and just enjoy the moment is very precious.
Okay. That's good. I love that idea of small wins and cherishing those opportunities as well. Last question. You kind of touched upon this already, but I wanted to maybe see if there's something else I could get out of you. You mentioned before, when we had a chance to chat, about that once you have more money, and I know you're in a good position, that you're profitable, and you're more open to kind of different spends and things like that. But you said that once you kind of have more money, you start thinking faster and trying lots of new things and making actually a lot of mistakes maybe along the way. What was there anything that you did personally towards making sure that you aren't burning through cash too quickly and making the same mistakes again?
Yeah, I think we actually had the other problem around, in the sense that when we raise money, I think if we could have just put the money in a
interest account,
in a fixed income, and would have done it, So we have the reverse problem, where our actually investors are guys, spend a bit more, don't be scared, try things, and I think it really comes from our DNA. We're not this traditional startup that got a lot of funding and for a great idea, and that they need to burn to gain market share. It took us a long time. It was difficult to raise money the first time. We said we don't want to go back to work for in a big company. Like, we don't want to go busted, basically. So we made sure to remain profitable ever since. So I think we're extremely scared in a way, and very, very, that we're trying to be really careful with our money here. So we definitely, right now, what we see is that the more people that we hire, obviously we need to let them make their mistakes, and that's sometimes a bit difficult, because you sometimes you think and because you know it because you've been through it and you've done these mistakes. But like, we know that when you have hire people and you want to trust them, you need to let them make mistakes so that you can learn. And sometimes they're costly mistakes, and you burn cash. So it's always a balance, but like I can confidently say that we never burn cash, like crazy. So whenever we test something, we make sure that it's not too much money. And I think being in a country like Canada is great, because you can actually test for very cheap in Canada. You can, and it's a very similar demography as the US, with similar habits in terms of consumption. And we are able to just for a fraction of the cost test an entire country, and if it doesn't work, we stop there. So we try to be very conscious. We never start testing in huge markets. We test in smaller markets, and then we grow. So yeah, I think it's definitely something that is in our mind. Like, we can't afford to burn cash. That's not in our DNA.
No, it's very interesting, and I think it's always a tough balance in terms of giving people the autonomy, the freedom to go make the mistakes, and like at what cost, right? As a business, but you kind of have to do it, right? In a way, because everybody has to learn if they don't know what happens when they do it. So, no, I appreciate the authenticity, Lucas, and all your answers. So it was amazing having you on the show, Lucas. I really appreciate your time and everything. So thank you so much for giving us the opportunity.
Thank you very much for having me, guys. It's been really a great time here.
Cool. So for everybody who's listening, this was another Off the Record podcast episode. The goal of the podcast is to build a community of founders and VCs who can share their wisdom about how to build better businesses. So thanks again, everybody, and I'll see you next time.